right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for Murock's Android Programming 2nd Edition by Joel Murock for the AWD1112 or 1112 Java programming class. Now, I'm going to take a little break for a second, and I want to just mention something to you. Hopefully you realize that this book that we're using has 3 different apps that it creates. A tip calculator app, a newsreader app, and this task list app. Okay? Now, I've already mentioned that we're not going to be going over the newsreader app in class. So my hope is that in the Java portion of the class, we will be able to, using Java, not Android, but just Java, we'll be able to create some kind of a tip calculator, and we'll also be able to create some kind of a task list. All right, that's what I'd like to do. And do the same thing with the, so a task list and a tip calculator. But I'd also probably going to do something like, that we've done before in other languages, like the BMI program, where we'll create it in Java, and then we'll come back and we'll recreate it in Android. All right, that's my goal, is to kind of show you a natural progression here. Okay, so chapter 14, which again starts on page 435, is on how to work with tabs and custom adapters. We have 2 applied objectives and 1 knowledge objective. Our applied objectives: divide an activity into 1 or more tabs, use a custom adapter to display data from an array in a list view widget. Those are our 2 applied objectives. Our knowledge objective: describe 1 advantage that a custom adapter provides over a built-in adapter, like those described in chapter 10. All right, so in the last chapter we learned how to write the database and how to create business classes for the task list app. Now we're going to learn how to use these classes to display data on the user interface. So if you remember from earlier, okay, the task list app displays the name on each list, or of each list, on a tab. So eventually we're going to have that here. And I don't know if it shows it, if it's later, if it shows it at all. But what we're going to have here is our categories up here. All right, personal and business eventually. So we'll use the Tab Manager class, originally made available by Google, to provide a way to use a fragment to display the content for each tab. Now, this Tab Manager class is not available as part of the Android API. So before we can use it, we have to add its library. Okay? And the author mentions that we can get the tabmanager.jar file using the source code for the book, and then we can copy that file into the libs directory for the project. Probably that's what we'll do. And after you do that, then you have to go in and you have to change, I guess it doesn't show it here, but it does in figure 14.1 on the top of page 437. And that is, we're going to have to also go in and go into the Gradle script and add a dependency that's going to say that we're also using that particular file. In addition, the Tab Manager uses classes from the Android v4 support library. So we'll also need to add a dependency for that. Now, what you see on your screen here and on the next page or the next slide is the layout for an activity that displays tabs. If you want to display tabs across the top of an activity, you can add code like what's shown here. It's more or less, as the author mentions towards the bottom of page 436, it's boilerplate or template code that you can copy and paste. The tab host widget defines a container class for tabs with 2 sets of children. First, a tab widget object that contains 1 or more tabs, and second, a frame layout object that can display the content of the selected tab. Since the tabs aren't added to the tab widget until runtime, they're not shown in the graphical layout editor. Now what's shown in figure 14.2 on pages 438 and 439 are the class. It shows the class for an activity that displays tabs. The class, as you can see here, begins by importing the Tab Manager class that is stored in the Tab Manager library. Then it imports the Fragment Activity class, all right, that's included in the Android v4 support library. In addition, it imports the Tab Host and Tab Spec classes used to work with tabs. You'll notice right away that this extends the Fragment Activity class, and that's generally considered the best way to display tabs. All right. Within this class, the onCreate method is used to get a reference to the Tab Host object. Then it calls the setup method from that object. After setting up the Tab Host object, it creates a new Tab Manager object and passes 3 arguments to the constructor of the Tab Manager that you can see right here. The context, which is this, the Tab Host object, and the ID of the frame layout widget used to display the content for the current tab. This is all a method here of aligning or lining things up. So we're writing code basically to set up our user interface. After creating the Tab Manager object, it creates a new object from the task list DB. Then it calls the getList methods to create from this object to get a list of or array list of objects. Then it has to check to see if there's one or more list objects, and if it does, it's going to loop its way through here and display the name of each list on the tab. Within the loop, the first statement that's right there creates a tab spec object to set its tag to the name of the list. Next, it uses the setIndicator method to set the label that's used for the name of the list. Third, it uses the addTab method of the Tab Manager class to add a tab and its content to the tab host. After it goes through and it loops through all this stuff, it checks to see whether the bundle object that's passed to it is not null. And if so, the code gets the name of the current tab's tag from the bundle object and sets the current tab to that tag. Finally, we've got an onSaveInstance method that begins by passing the bundle object to the onSaveInstance superclass. So within the class for an activity, you use the Tab Manager to add one or more tabs. After you do this, you have to basically display the tab content. So figure 14.3 on pages 440 and 441 do this. It shows the class for a fragment that displays the content for a tab. It begins by extending the fragment class available from the Android support library. The onCreate method begins, as you can see in here, the onCreate method begins by inflating the layout for the fragment. Then we get a reference to the text view widget. Next, we get a reference to the tab host object. After that, we use the getCurrentTab method to get the name of the current tab, and then we call the refreshTaskList method to display a message on the text view widget that includes the name of the current tab. All right, which is done in here. Finally, we've got the onResume method that begins by calling the onResume method of the superclass. So within the class for a fragment, you use the tab host class to get the tag for the current tab, which you can then display and use to display the appropriate data. All right, let me check my time here. And we are only at 10 minutes, I guess. So we can go on. And the next thing that's discussed, starting on page 442, is how to create a custom adapter. Just looking over here. Okay, well, we should be able to finish this. And then afterwards, we actually go into looking at the task list app. Well, sounds fine to me. So, after the task list app reads a list of tasks from the database, it needs to display them on the user interface. All right, to do that, we could use a simple adapter to display them as we have done in previous chapters. However, the task list app includes a checkbox in the list view widget. To get the checkbox to work correctly, it's better to use a custom adapter, as we're going to look at next. So figure 14-4 on pages 442 and 443 shows the layout for an item in the list view widget that's used to display the list of tasks. You'll notice that this layout displays a checkbox widget here that indicates whether or not the task has been completed. It also has a text view widget here for the name of the task and another one for any associated notes. For the checkbox widget, the button attribute, all right, the button attribute that's in there specifies a custom layout for the button. For the text view widgets, the text color attribute specifies black for the color of the text, which isn't really necessary because that's the default value anyway. So when you look, when the layout for a list view widget contains complex widgets, all right, you code a class that extends the layout as shown in figure 14-5 on pages 444 and 445. This will allow you to display the widgets correctly and handle any events that occur on them. So the task list layout class begins by extending the relative layout class and implementing the on-click listener interface. Then we've got a couple different constructors here. The first constructor that you see at the top supports some of the Android tools. It's not technically required, but it's a good idea to put it in there. The second constructor, as you can see, has two parameters, a context object and a task object. The first statement passes the context object to the constructor of the superclass, and then the next couple statements set the context for the current object and created task list DB object. Next, we use the getSystemService method to get a layout inflator object, and then we inflate the layout defined in the previous figures. Finally, we set the listeners. And after they've been called, we call the setTask method to set the task object as an instance variable and display the task object on the user interface. Now this setTask that you see in here and on the continuation of figure 14-5, this is on page 447, it begins by setting an instance variable for the task object equal to the task parameter. It then continues to check by checking whether the milliseconds for the completed date are greater than 0. If they are, the task has been marked as completed. The onClick method begins by using a switch statement that you see here to check whether the checkbox widget was clicked. If it wasn't clicked, some other area of the layout for the item was clicked. So again, this has to be handled. Now, the class for the custom adapter is shown on figure 14.6 on pages 448 and 449. The class extends the base adapter class. Then it declares two instance variables, a content object, which is really a context object, and an array list of task objects. After the constructor, we override four methods that are in here. Get count, which returns the count of the number of items in the array list. Get item, which returns the task object at the specified position in the array list object. Get ID item, which returns a position parameter. And the fourth one, which is get view. Get view returns a task layout object like the one defined by the class shown previously. So the class for a custom adapter that extends the base adapter can supply data for list view and spinner widgets. Figure 14.7 on pages 450 and 451 shows a class for a fragment that uses the custom adapter. All right, you'll notice it also has as a refresh task list in here. There it is. Which gets the tasks for a list from the database and uses the custom adapter to display them. All right, let's stop here, and there's not much left, but we will go through a little bit as they show in the book here on the task list app. Okay, I'll be back with that presentation shortly.